It was past midnight when the knock came, soft but clear, cutting through the heavy silence of the house. Sadia had not been sleeping anyway. She lay on her back, eyes open, watching faint shadows move across the ceiling as streetlights slipped through the curtains. The room felt too large, too quiet, like it no longer belonged to her. For weeks, she had sensed something shifting in her marriage. Farhan had grown distant, careful with his words, protective of his phone, absent even when he sat beside her. The warmth they once shared had faded into polite routine. They spoke about groceries, bills, weather, nothing deeper, nothing real. She told herself it was stress, work, pressure, normal life. But deep down, a quiet fear had already taken root. The knock came again. Sadia slowly pushed herself up, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her heart beat faster, not from surprise, but from the strange feeling that something important was about to happen. Yes, she called softly. The door opened just a little. Hamza stood there. He was 17 now, tall and lean, his hair falling over his forehead. He looked older in the dim light, his face serious in a way that did not match his age. He usually avoided late-night talks. He stayed in his room, headphones on, lost in his own world. Seeing him here at her door made her uneasy. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. His voice carried something she had never heard before. Not anger, not attitude. Something heavier, of course, she said, trying to sound steady. He stepped inside and closed the door gently behind him. For a moment he just stood there. His hands were tucked into the pockets of his hoodie, shoulders slightly tense. He avoided her eyes, staring instead at the carpet as if arranging his thoughts. Sadia gestured toward the chair near the window. "Sit." But he didn't. He remained standing. "I didn't know where else to go," he said finally. Those words unsettled her more than the knock. "What happened?" she asked. He inhaled deeply, then looked at her. His eyes were red, not from tears, but from holding them back. "I heard Dad tonight." Sadia's chest tightened. "He was outside on the balcony," Hamza continued. "He thought I was asleep." The room felt smaller with each word. He wasn't talking about work. Sadia's fingers curled into the blanket on her lap. A quiet part of her had prepared for this moment, yet hearing it spoken aloud felt like stepping into cold water. "What did he say?" Shay asked softly. Hamza swallowed. "He said he can't do this anymore. He said he's tired of pretending. He said he's going to leave." The words hung between them. Leave. Sadia, single quotes S. Mind raced. But her face remained calm. Years of holding emotions inside had taught her how to control her expression, but inside something cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, just a silent break that echoed in her chest. "Did he say when?" she asked. "Soon," Hamza replied. "He said he's already made up his mind." Silence filled the room. The clock ticked steadily as if nothing had changed. Sadia felt strangely still. She had imagined this possibility many times during lonely evenings. The late messages, the sudden business trips, the way Farhan stopped asking about her day. She had noticed how he avoided sitting too close, how his laughter came easily on phone calls, but not with her. She had felt the distance grow inch by inch. But she had hoped she was wrong. Now hope was no longer an option. Hamza shifted his weight, his jaw tight. "I don't understand him," he said, anger slipping through his calm voice. "You've done nothing wrong." Sadia looked at him carefully. For years she had tried to build a gentle bond with him. She married Farhan when Hamza was 14. His mother had passed away years before that. The house had already carried grief before she entered it. She had known she could never replace anyone. She never tried. She simply wanted to care. At first, Hamza had kept his distance. Short replies, polite nods, closed doors. But she had been patient. She left food outside his room when he studied late. She attended his school events quietly, clapping from the back row. She learned which subjects. He struggled with which football team he loved. Slowly, very slowly, he had started speaking more, asking for help with assignments, sharing small jokes. Nothing dramatic, just small bridges built over time. And now he stood here, not as a distant stepson, but as someone who looked hurt for her. "You shouldn't have heard that," she said. Gently, "I'm glad I did," he replied quickly. "At least now I know I'm not imagining things." She noticed the way he said it. Not just about his father, about the tension in the house, the silent dinners, the way Farhan disappeared, emotionally long before physically leaving. "Does he know you heard?" she asked. Hmza shook his head. "No." Another silence. Sadia forced herself to breathe slowly. Panic would not help. Cares would not help. She needed clarity. "Thank you for telling me," she said quietly. Amza finally sat down on the edge of her bed instead of the chair. It was a small movement, but it showed trust. "What are you going to do?" The question felt heavy. "I don't know," she answered honestly. For a moment, he looked younger again. It's just a boy caught between parents, confused and protective. At the same time, "Are you okay?" That question nearly broke her composure. No one had asked her that in months. "I will be," she said, though she wasn't sure. Hamza stared at the floor. "He doesn't see what he has." Sadia closed her eyes briefly. She did not want Hamza to feel forced to choose sides. "He's still your father," she reminded him. "I know," he said quickly. "But that doesn't mean he's right." Honesty in his voice surprised her. Outside, a car passed, headlights flashing briefly across the walls. Achia felt time moving strangely, as if this night stretched longer than it should. "Why did you come to me?" she asked gently. He hesitated. "Because you deserved to know." Those words settled deep inside her. For years she had wondered if she truly belonged in this house. If she was always slightly outside, tolerated but not fully accepted. Yet in this moment, Hamza's choice was clear. He had come to her, not to a friend, not to anyone else. He had chosen her. Sadia studied his face. The sharp lines of his jaw were more defined now, shoulders broader. He was not a child anymore. He carried his emotions differently, more quietly, but more intensely. "You shouldn't carry this alone," she said. "I'm not," he replied softly. "It's why I'm here." The air between them felt different, not uncomfortable, not inappropriate, just honest, raw. Two people facing the same storm. "Do you think he's seeing someone?" Hamza asked carefully. Sadia did not answer immediately. She had suspected it. Late smiles at his phone. The way he guarded his screen, the sudden interest in new clothes, new cologne. She had noticed everything. "I don't know," she said at last, but both of them understood the truth hiding behind those words. Hamza ran a hand through his hair. "I hate this." "I know," she whispered. For the first time that night, her voice trembled slightly. She looked away, blinking back moisture from her eyes. She would not fall apart now, not in front of him, but Hamza noticed. Without thinking, he said, "You're not alone." The sentence was simple, yet it carried more comfort than anything Farhan had said in months. Sadia met his gaze. Something shifted quietly inside her. Not romance, not anything forbidden. Just a realization that connection can appear in unexpected places. That sometimes the person you least expect becomes your strongest support. The house creaked softly as if adjusting to this new truth. What if he leaves? Hamza asked suddenly. The question made everything real. "Then we face it," Sadia said, though her heart raced. "We?" he repeated. She nodded slowly. "Families don't disappear overnight." He studied her carefully, as if measuring the strength in her words. Downstairs. They heard the front door open. Farhan was home. Both of them froze. Footsteps echoed faintly through the hallway. A door closed. Silence again. Hamza stood up quickly. "He thinks I'm asleep." Sadia's pulse quickened. The tension that had been quiet now felt sharp. "Go to your room," she whispered. He moved toward the door, then paused. He turned back to look at her one more time. "Don't let him make you feel small," he said firmly. Before she could respond, he slipped out into the dark hallway. Sadia remained sitting on the bed, staring at the door long after it closed. The house felt different now. The truth had entered the room and refused to leave. She heard Farhan's footsteps downstairs, moving casually, unaware that everything had changed. Sadia lay back slowly, eyes open again. But no longer. Confused now, she knew. And knowing was painful. But it was also power. Because the next move would not belong only to Farhan. For the first time in months, Sadia felt something clear inside her. Not fear, not denial, strength. And as the night stretched on, she realized that the knock on her door had not only revealed a secret, it had awakened something within her that had been silent for far too long, and nothing in that house would ever feel the same again. The days after that midnight knock moved quickly, yet every moment felt sharp and clear. Sadia woke the next morning before sunrise, her eyes heavy but her mind alert. She watched Farhan sleep beside her, his back turned as always. There was a time when he used to pull her closer in his sleep. Now there was a quiet distance between them, even on the same bed. She studied his face in the pale morning light and wondered how someone could look so peaceful while planning to walk away. At breakfast, Farhan acted normal. He asked Hamza about school. He asked Sadia if there was enough sugar in his tea. His voice was calm, steady, almost too careful. Sadia answered politely. She noticed how he kept his phone face down on the table. She noticed how he smiled at a message he did not show them. Every small detail felt louder than before. Hamza barely spoke. He watched his father in silence, his jaw tight. Once their eyes met across the table. There was understanding there, a shared secret. It made Sadia feel both comforted and sad at the same time. She never wanted to stand between father and son. Yet now she stood beside Hamza in something neither of them had chosen. When Farhan left for work, the house felt lighter but also emptier. Sadia began cleaning the kitchen just to keep her hands busy. Hamza lingered in the doorway longer than usual. "Are you going to talk to him?" he asked quietly. "Not yet," she replied. "When?" His voice carried frustration, not at her, but at the waiting. "When I'm ready," she said, turning to face him. "I need to be calm." Hamza nodded, but his restlessness showed. "I don't like pretending." "Neither do I," she admitted. That afternoon, Sadia sat alone in the living room. The sunlight filled the space, warm and bright, but inside her chest there was a slow ache. She thought about the early days of her marriage, how Farhan had been gentle, attentive, how he had promised partnership, stability. She remembered decorating the house together, choosing curtains, arguing softly about wall colors, laughing afterward. Those memories did not feel fake. They felt distant. She realized something important then. Love does not disappear in one night. It fades in small, unnoticed moments. It weakens when conversations stop, when honesty becomes difficult, when effort feels one-sided. She had tried to fix things quietly for months. Now she wondered if she had been the only one trying. In the evening, Hamza returned from school earlier than usual. He dropped his bag and walked straight to the kitchen where Sadia was preparing dinner. "He's not home yet?" he asked. "No." Hamza leaned against the counter. "He used to come home before sunset." "Yes," she said softly. They both understood the meaning behind that change. Dinner passed with forced calmness. Farhan arrived late but cheerful. He talked about work, about a new project, about future plans that sounded empty. Sadia listened carefully, searching his face for guilt, for hesitation. She saw none. That hurt more than anger would have. Later that night, Sadia heard Farhan step onto the balcony again. Her heart beat fast. She remained in bed, eyes closed, listening. His voice was low, but softer than it had been with her in months. She could not hear the exact words, but she did not need to. A tone was enough. Across the hallway, a door opened quietly. A door opened quietly. A few minutes later, Sadia's bedroom door knocked again. This time, she did not hesitate. "Come in," Hamza entered, his face tense. "He's talking to her." The confirmation felt like a final piece of a puzzle falling into place. Sadia inhaled deeply. "Go back to your room," she said gently. "You shouldn't have to listen." "I don't want you to be alone," he replied. The honesty in his voice struck her. He was no longer just reacting as a son. He was standing beside her as someone who cared about her pain. "I'm stronger than you think," she said. "I know," he answered. "That's what makes it worse." She looked at him carefully. There was admiration in his eyes, respect, and something else, something protective, intense, almost fierce. It surprised her. "You deserve better," he said suddenly. The words echoed in the room. Sadia felt a strange warmth rise in her chest. No one had said that to her in a long time. She had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. "Life is not always fair," she replied carefully. "Then why should we accept it?" He challenged Dada's question, carried the boldness of youth, but also a sharp clarity. Sadia realized he was not a child anymore. The boy who once avoided her gaze was now looking straight at her, unafraid of difficult truths. Over the next few days, their conversations grew deeper. Not long talks, not dramatic scenes, but honest exchanges in quiet corners of the house. In the kitchen while making tea. In the living room while the television played softly in the background. In small pauses between normal life, Hamza started helping her more. Fixing a broken shelf, carrying groceries without being asked. Sitting with her after dinner instead of disappearing into his room. Each small action felt like a silent promise. "I'm here." One evening, as rain tapped against the windows, the power went out. The house fell into darkness. Sadia lit candles in the living room, their soft glow casting gentle shadows on the walls. Farhan was not home again. Hamza sat across from her, the candlelight reflecting in his eyes. "Do you regret marrying him?" he asked quietly. The question caught her off guard. "No," she said after a moment. "I regret losing what we had." Hamza watched her carefully. "I used to think you were just trying to replace my mother." Her heart tightened, but she stayed calm. "I never wanted that. I know now," he said. "You never forced anything. You just stayed." His words felt like healing. "Thank you," she whispered. He leaned back, studying her in silence. The storm outside grew stronger, wind brushing against the windows. Inside, the air felt charged but steady. "I don't understand how he can hurt you," Hamza said. "People change," she replied. "Or maybe they show who they really are." "And what if he leaves?" he asked again. Softer this time, Sadia looked into the candle flame. "Then we rebuild." He repeated once more. She met his eyes. "Families are more than marriage papers." Something shifted in his expression. A quiet relief. That night, as the rain slowed and the power returned, Sadia felt something new forming between them. Not something wrong, not something inappropriate. It was deeper than that. It was trust born from shared pain. Two people standing in the same storm, choosing not to let each other fall. The tension in the house grew heavier as days passed. Farhan became more distant, almost impatient, avoided long conversations. He left early, returned late. Sadia stopped asking questions. She saved her strength. One afternoon, she found herself laughing at something Hamza said while they washed dishes together. The sound surprised her. It had been weeks since she laughed naturally. Hamza smiled at her reaction. "See, you still can?" She looked at him and realized something important. In the middle of heartbreak, she had not completely lost herself. A part of her was still alive, still capable of warmth. But that warmth now existed outside her marriage. And that truth was both comforting and dangerous. Later that night, Farhan announced he would be traveling for a few days. "Work?" he said again. His tone carried finality. Sadia simply nodded. When the door closed behind him, the house felt different, not tense. Just honest. Hamza stood in the hallway, watching her carefully. "It's happening," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The silence was not awkward. It was heavy with realization. "Are you scared?" He asked that sad thought about it. About loneliness. About starting over. About being judged. About rebuilding her life. "No," she said finally, "I'm tired. But I'm not scared." Hamza stepped closer, just enough to show support but not cross any lines. "You won't go through it alone." His words settled deep in her heart. In that moment, Sadia understood something clearly. The marriage might be ending. The man she loved might be leaving. But the connections built through kindness, patience, and care were stronger than she had believed. And as she looked at Hamza standing beside her, no longer distant, no longer unsure, she realized that sometimes when one relationship breaks, another becomes stronger in ways no one expected. The storm outside had passed, but inside the house, everything was preparing for a final change, and neither of them would ever see each other the same way again. The day Farhan finally admitted the truth came quietly, without warning or drama. He sat at the dining table, his tie loose, his hands folded on the polished wood. Sadia was standing by the window, arms crossed, watching the sky dim into evening. Hamza had left for a friend's house, giving them space. Farhan's face was calm, almost rehearsed, but Sadia could see through it. She already knew the words that would fall from his mouth, the confessions that had been whispered in shadows for months. When he spoke, it was slow, deliberate. I've been seeing someone else," he said, voice low. "I've felt trapped. I've felt unhappy. I need space." The sentences sounded empty, like lines he had memorized. Sadia listened, her mind quiet, her heart steady. There was pain, of course, a hollow ache that settled deep inside her chest, but there was no shock. She had mourned this long before he finally admitted it aloud. Farhan looked at her, waiting for an outburst. Waiting for tears, anger, pleading. Sadia simply nodded. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. That was all she said. Nothing more. It was enough. Words of rage would have given him power. Words of grief would have drained her energy. Instead, she chose calm. She had already begun rebuilding her inner self during the weeks of quiet tension. She had already started healing in small, private ways, walking alone, reading late at night, laughing quietly at memories that belonged only to her. Farhan's confession did not destroy her. It confirmed a path she had already started to walk. The divorce proceedings were smooth. Han wanted speed, wanting to distance himself from the house, the past, and the responsibilities he had long avoided. Sadia agreed, not because she welcomed the separation, but because she had learned that sometimes peace comes from acceptance, not from argument. The papers were signed quickly, quietly, and without the spectacle some might expect. There was no yelling, no blame. Only the acknowledgement of a relationship that had reached its natural end. And for Sadia, that finality was strangely liberating. The home which had felt heavy and oppressive for so long now breathed. Empty walls seemed like possibilities rather than reminders of failure. She could rebuild, not around someone else's choices, but around her own. Hamza returned home a few days later. He had stayed with Farhan for a short while, adjusting to the news, absorbing the reality that his father's decisions would change their family forever. He entered the house with the cautious steps of someone stepping into unfamiliar territory. Yet his eyes searched for Sadia first. When he saw her sitting on the couch, quietly reading a book, he hesitated, then smiled slightly. The boy she had watched grow into a young man stood before her, taller, more composed, but still carrying that spark of empathy and quiet understanding she had come to rely on. He did not rush to hug her or demand attention. Instead, he sat beside her, shoulder to shoulder, in a silence that spoke volumes. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. Said Book slowly. "I am," she said. "I will be." Hamza nodded. There was a pause, as if both were weighing the weight of the past months. "It's weird," he said finally. "Everything changed. So fast." "Yes," Sadia agreed. "But we survived." He looked at her, really looked, and she saw recognition in his gaze. Recognition of shared pain, shared disappointment, shared resilience. He was not just a boy anymore. He was someone who understood her not just as a stepmother, but as a person who had lived through difficult choices, someone who had felt loneliness and strength in the same heartbeat. And that understanding built a bridge between them that no one else had ever crossed. The days that followed were a mixture of routine and quiet healing. Sadia returned to her work, teaching students who did not know her personal struggles, and yet reminded her of life's ordinary joys. She began laughing more often, her smiles coming easier, not forced but genuine. She met new colleagues, engaged in conversations about books, movies, trivial everyday things that felt alive. Life moved on in the way it always does, but she felt different, stronger, more capable of seeing beauty in ordinary moments. Hamza, too, adjusted. He spent time at her house often, not as a child needing care, but as someone who chose to be. Present, as someone who had grown into a protector, a confidant, and a friend. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled through the curtains, Sadia heard a soft knock at her door. She smiled softly, recognizing the rhythm of someone familiar. Hamza entered, carrying a book he had borrowed from the local library. His hair was neatly combed, his jacket draped over his arm. "I wanted to see if you were okay," he said quietly, placing the book on the table beside her. "I'm better than okay," Sadia replied, warmth in her voice. "And you?" "Good," he said. "I'm learning." His smile was brief but honest. They sat together for hours, talking about school, books, life, the simple joys and the small challenges. There was laughter, and there was comfort in silence. Sadia realized that what they shared could not be labeled in conventional terms. It was not forbidden. It was not romantic in a scandalous sense. It was something deeper. A bond forged in hardship, in trust, in shared experience. A love not of passion, but of loyalty, care, and mutual respect. Weeks turned into months. Sadia's home regained its warmth. Hamza remained part of her life in subtle, meaningful ways. They learned to rely on each other without expectation. He would knock before entering, and she would always answer with a quiet welcome. Their conversations ranged from mundane to profound, and each exchange carried the weight of trust built in the aftermath of heartbreak. He encouraged her to try new things. She guided him when choices seemed unclear. Their relationship was a dance of mutual care, neither overstepping. Both understanding the boundaries and respect inherent in their connection, Sadia began reflecting on love in a new way. She understood now that life often separates us from people we expect to stay, while introducing others who quietly support and inspire us. Farhan's departure, painful as it was, had allowed room for Sadia and Hamza to connect honestly, without pretense. She saw that love is not only about romance, it is also about kindness, protection, shared strength, and the courage to stand together through storms. One evening, as the house settled into calm, Hamza said, "You taught me something important." Sadia tilted her head, curious. He continued, "You showed me what real care looks like, even when it's hard. Even when people leave." Sadia felt tears gather in her eyes. They were not tears of sorrow, but of gratitude. She had survived the heartbreak, and in doing so, had created a new space in her life, one of honesty, compassion, and quiet understanding. The years that followed were not dramatic. There were no grand gestures or cinematic moments. Life moved steadily in ordinary rhythms of work, study, meals, laughter, and conversation. Yet in those rhythms, Sadia discovered a freedom she had never known. She could breathe without fear of betrayal. She could enjoy the small victories of everyday life, and she could witness Hamza's growth into a young adult, aware of responsibility, empathy, and integrity. Their bond deepened naturally, like roots of a tree spreading underground before any branches touched the sky. Through it all, Stydia understood that some of the most powerful transformations occur quietly. The night Hamza had knocked on her door had changed everything, not by introducing scandal or forbidden love, but by revealing the strength of honesty and the importance of trust. That single moment created a ripple that carried through months of sadness, frustration, and uncertainty, eventually landing in a space of resilience, warmth, and mutual respect. The memory of Farhan faded gradually, not with resentment, but with acceptance. Sadia no longer imagined what could have been. She lived fully in what was. Hamza, who had once been the boy hesitant to speak his mind, had become a steadfast presence, a reminder that life can offer connection even after heartbreak. Their relationship was nuanced, subtle, and deeply meaningful. It was a lesson in how human connections adapt and endure, even when circumstances change. One quiet afternoon, Sadia and Hamza sat together in the garden, sunlight warming their faces. He leaned back against the bench, relaxed for the first time. "In months, I don't think I'd ever tell anyone this," he said softly, "but you made everything better." Sadia looked at him, warmth in her eyes. "You made it easier for me too," she replied. They sat in silence, enjoying the calm, letting words fade into the gentle sounds of the garden, the breeze, the birds, the soft rustle of leaves. There was no need to define what they felt. No need to label it. The bond was real, tangible, and enduring. It had grown from adversity, nurtured by honesty, patience, to understanding. Sadia realized then that life does not always follow the stories we expect. Sometimes the endings we fear lead to beginnings we could not have imagined. Farhan's choices had caused pain, but they had also created an opportunity for Sadia and Hamza to discover a form of love that was pure, loyal, and transformative. They had survived betrayal, disappointment, and loneliness together, and from that survival emerged a connection that neither time nor circumstance could weaken.